Hollywood isn't just about glitz and glamour, it's also home to some of the most legendary rivalries in entertainment history. Behind the bright lights and blockbuster hits, some of the biggest stars and filmmakers have battled it out for fame, power, and revenge. Some of these feuds instigated creativity, while others nearly tore careers apart. Today we're counting down the top 5 most intense Hollywood rivalries, some of which changed the industry forever. Starting this list at number 5 is the feud that shook the Fast and Furious, The Rock Johnson and Vin Diesel's Fast and Furious showdown. The Fast and Furious franchise has always preached one thing: family. But behind the high-speed action and billion-dollar box office success, a war was brewing, one that nearly tore the franchise apart. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Vin Diesel weren't just co-stars, they were two alpha males, both used to being in control. When Johnson entered the Fast and Furious universe in Fast 5, he didn't just revive the franchise, he stole the show. His portrayal of Luke Hobbs brought fresh energy, and audiences loved it. But not everyone was thrilled. Behind the scenes, tension between Johnson and Diesel started simmering. What began as a subtle power struggle soon escalated into an all-out feud. Diesel, a producer on the films, had always positioned himself as the franchise's leader. Johnson, on the other hand, was used to being the hardest worker in the room, expecting the same level of commitment from everyone else. When Johnson posted a cryptic Instagram rank calling out unnamed candy asses for their lack of professionalism, fans instantly knew who he was talking about. The tension reached its peak during the filming of The Fate of the Furious. Diesel and Johnson reportedly refused to film scenes together, forcing the production team to work around their animosity. The conflict became so intense that Johnson walked away from the main franchise, instead launching his own spin-off, Hobbs and Shaw with Jason Statham. This wasn't just a case of two actors not getting along, it was a seismic shift that changed the direction of one of Hollywood's biggest franchises. What many don't realize is how this feud didn't just divide the cast, it reshaped the entire Fast and Furious universe. Behind closed doors, studio executives had to navigate the growing divide, carefully crafting contracts that would keep both stars happy. It also led to a surprising twist: Diesel's attempts to bring Johnson back. In 2021, Diesel made a public plea, posting on Instagram and invoking the memory of the late Paul Walker, urging Johnson to return. But Johnson wasn't having it. In a rare moment of public rejection, he called Diesel's move as manipulation and confirmed he was done with the main franchise for good. Despite the feud, both actors thrived. Johnson continued building his empire, starring in blockbuster hits and expanding his business ventures. Diesel remained the face of Fast and Furious, but fans couldn't ignore the absence of Luke Hobbs. For years, it seemed like a reunion was impossible, until an unexpected twist changed everything. In 2023, against all odds, Johnson made a shocking return to the Fast and Furious saga, appearing in a post-credits scene in Fast X. The news stunned fans, considering how public and bitter the fallout had been. Rumors swirled about secret negotiations and massive paychecks, but one thing was clear: Hollywood is a place where grudges don't always last forever, especially when billions of dollars are on the line. The Rock vs. Vin Diesel feud wasn't just a clash of egos, it was a battle that reshaped one of the biggest film franchises in history. It proved that even in a series built on the idea of family, not everyone gets along. But in the end, money, legacy, and the demands of an ever-growing fanbase can make even the biggest rivals reconsider their differences. The real question now is, how long will the truce last? Coming in at number 4 is the battle of the action heroes, Arnold Schwarzenegger vs. Sylvester Stallone. For over a decade, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone weren't just action stars, they were warriors in a cinematic arms race, each determined to outdo the other. Their rivalry defined the golden era of action films, turning Hollywood into a battleground of muscles, explosions, and one-liners. Fans were divided, the box office was ablaze, and the two icons couldn't stand the sight of each other. But behind the pumped-up competition, there was a twist no one saw coming, one that would prove Schwarzenegger was playing 4D chess while Stallone was playing Russian roulette. It started in the early 80s, when Conan the Barbarian put Schwarzenegger on the map just as First Blood cemented Stallone as an action powerhouse. As the Terminator and Rambo sequels exploded, so did their mutual hatred. They would trash-talk each other in interviews, mock each other's physiques, and battle over who could rack up the biggest body count on screen. Stallone later admitted that he trained harder and pushed his limits simply to avoid being overshadowed by Schwarzenegger. But the rivalry wasn't just about who had the biggest biceps, it was strategic. Both actors fought for scripts, roles, and the box office crown. Schwarzenegger took pride in his ability to deliver massive opening weekends, while Stallone prided himself on his longevity and ability to bounce back from flops. The feud reached its peak in the late 80s, when the two would deliberately position their films against each other, leading to box office showdowns like Predator vs. Over the Top and Tango and Cash vs. Total Recall. Then came the ultimate betrayal. In the early 90s, Hollywood was buzzing about Stop, or My Mom Will Shoot, a bizarre action comedy that didn't seem to fit either star's filmography. Behind the scenes, Schwarzenegger had heard whispers that Stallone was considering the role, and he saw an opportunity. In one of the greatest Hollywood pranks of all time, Schwarzenegger pretended to be interested in the project, letting word leak that he was desperate to land it. When Stallone caught wind of this, his competitive instincts kicked in. There was no way he was going to let his Austrian rival beat him to a major role. He immediately signed on, thinking he had just one-upped Schwarzenegger. What he didn't realize was that Schwarzenegger had zero intention of doing the film. He had baited Stallone into taking a movie that turned out to be one of the worst flops of his career. When asked about it years later, Schwarzenegger laughed, confirming that he had set the whole thing up just to watch Stallone crash and burn. It was a masterstroke, a win in a battle that had stretched across a decade. Ironically, as time went on, their once bitter rivalry turned into an alliance. The two eventually became friends, co-starring in the Expendables series and even joking about their past feuds in interviews. But the effects of their competition rippled far beyond just their careers. Their larger-than-life battle reshaped the action genre, raising the stakes for every star that followed. It forced Hollywood to think bigger, bolder, and bloodier, giving rise to the high-octane blockbusters that still dominate theaters today. Schwarzenegger vs. Stallone wasn't just a fight between two men, it was a war that shaped an entire industry. And in the end, it left both warriors standing, bruised but victorious, as the undisputed kings of action cinema. Right in the middle of the bunch, coming in at number 3, is a rivalry of innovation between Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. Spielberg and Lucas are two of the most influential filmmakers in history, shaping modern cinema in ways no one could have imagined. But beneath their friendship was an unspoken competition, one that pushed them to revolutionize Hollywood again and again. This was no bitter feud or dramatic fallout, it was a rivalry built on mutual respect, but also on an intense desire to outdo one another. Their battle wasn't just about personal success, it was about reshaping the entire film industry. And in one unexpected twist, Lucas ended up giving Spielberg the greatest financial windfall of his life. By accident. The rivalry first took shape in the early 1970s, when both directors were up-and-coming visionaries. Lucas, the reserved and methodical filmmaker, was obsessed with world-building and technological advancements. Spielberg, the bold and emotionally driven storyteller, had an instinct for crafting unforgettable characters and blockbuster spectacles. While Lucas was experimenting with THX 1138 and American Graffiti, Spielberg was proving his blockbuster chops with Jaws, the film that birthed the summer movie season. Then came Star Wars. Lucas's 1977 space epic changed the game, setting new records and redefining what was possible in special effects. Spielberg, who had just released Close Encounters of the Third Kind, was in awe, but he also knew he had to step up. Lucas had created the ultimate sci-fi fantasy, and Spielberg needed to make his own mark. He responded with Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981, a film that blended adventure, spectacle, and edge-of-your-seat action in a way no one had seen before. Throughout the 80s, the two continued pushing each other to greater heights. E.T. the Extraterrestrial, 1982, became the highest-grossing film of all time, dethroning Star Wars, but only until Return of the Jedi came along. Lucas, meanwhile, took inspiration from Spielberg's storytelling techniques to make Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade more emotionally compelling. Their back and forth was an endless game of cinematic one-upmanship. But the real twist in their rivalry came from a bet, a friendly wager that would have massive financial consequences. Before Star Wars was released, Lucas was feeling anxious about how it would perform. He believed Spielberg's upcoming film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, would be the bigger success. So, in a moment of nervous doubt, Lucas proposed a deal. They would trade 2.5% of each other's film's earnings. Spielberg agreed, thinking it was a fun, harmless bet. What happened next is Hollywood legend. Close Encounters did well, but Star Wars became the highest-grossing film ever at the time. Because of their deal, Spielberg has made millions from Star Wars, without ever directing a single frame of it. Lucas, who later realized what he had given away, could only watch as his friend reaped the benefits of a decision made in a moment of self-doubt. Even as their careers evolved, their rivalry continued shaping the industry. Lucas' advancements with digital effects and CGI influenced Jurassic Park, which set the standard for blockbuster filmmaking. Spielberg's mastery of character-driven storytelling pushed Lucas to fine-tune his own narrative skills. Even when Lucas struggled with the Star Wars prequels, Spielberg was there, offering guidance and support, proving that even the fiercest rivals can also be allies. Their rivalry wasn't about tearing each other down, it was about making each other better. And in doing so, they didn't just change their own careers, they changed Hollywood itself. The blockbuster landscape, the evolution of special effects, and the very idea of franchise filmmaking all exist as they do today because Spielberg and Lucas spent decades trying to outdo one another. The world of cinema will never see another rivalry quite like it. Just one more rivalry to go before we get to the #1 Hollywood rivalry of all time. At number 2 we have a genuine clash of the titans, Marlon Brando and Frank Sinatra's Cold War on Guys and Dolls. Marlon Brando and Frank Sinatra's behind-the-scenes tension on Guys and Dolls was more than just a personality clash, it was a battle of egos that turned the set into a quiet war zone. Brando, the brooding method actor, and Sinatra, the sharp-tongued, no-nonsense crooner, couldn't have been more different. Their mutual disdain was obvious from the moment they were cast together, and it only grew as filming progressed. Sinatra had desperately wanted the role of Sky Masterson, the suave gambler, but the studio instead handed it to Brando, a decision that left Old Blue Eyes seething. To make matters worse, Sinatra was cast as Nathan Detroit, a role he considered beneath him. From day one, he made it clear that he had no patience for Brando's method acting, dismissing it as pretentious and unnecessary. He famously called him Mumbles because of his tendency to deliver lines in a barely audible murmur, a dig that Brando found as irritating as Sinatra's perfectionism when it came to singing. Their biggest battle came during the filming of Adelaide, a scene where Sinatra had to eat cheesecake take after take. Brando, aware of how much Sinatra despised filming multiple takes, intentionally flubbed his lines repeatedly just to watch him suffer. Each time the director called for another take, Sinatra grew angrier, eventually exploding in frustration and throwing his plate of cheesecake against the wall. Brando, ever the provocateur, found the entire ordeal hilarious. The feud didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. Off set, the two barely spoke. Sinatra, who valued professionalism over theatricality, saw Brando as an arrogant show-off, while Brando viewed Sinatra as a lazy performer who relied too much on his natural charisma rather than true acting skill. Their distaste for one another was so well known that even decades later, Brando still couldn't resist taking shots at Sinatra in interviews, once joking that his co-star was little more than a song and dance man. Despite their hostility, Guys and Dolls became a hit, but their rivalry remained one of Hollywood's most infamous. Their Cold War was never fully resolved, and they avoided working together again, each continuing their legendary careers in separate lanes. Though both men were titans of entertainment, neither could stomach the other, and their time on Guys and Dolls remains one of the great feuds of classic Hollywood. And now, coming in on this list at number 1, is the ultimate Hollywood feud. No rivalry in Hollywood history is as infamous as the one between Joan Crawford and Bette Davis. Their hatred for each other spanned decades, fueled by jealousy, career competition, and even romantic entanglements. This wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was a deep-seated hatred that spanned decades, fueled by jealousy, ambition, and a man who came between them. Their legendary feud wasn't just about two actresses fighting for the spotlight, it was a grudge match that changed Hollywood forever. The origins of their animosity can be traced back to 1935, when Davis delivered a career-defining performance in Dangerous, winning her first Oscar. Instead of basking in the praise, she found her moment overshadowed by Crawford, who had just announced her divorce from Hollywood royalty Douglas Fairbanks Jr. Every headline that should have been about Davis's triumph was instead about Crawford's love life. Davis, who craved serious recognition, never forgave her for stealing the limelight. But the real battle began in the early 40s, when Crawford set her sights on actor Frank Attone, the man Davis was secretly in love with. Not only did Crawford pursue him, but she married him, a move many believe was designed to get under Davis's skin. Davis never admitted it publicly, but those who knew her claimed she never got over it. She viewed Crawford as a calculated manipulator who used sex appeal to get what she wanted, while Crawford saw Davis as a cold, pretentious actress who resented her glamour and charm. Their rivalry reached its boiling point in 1962, when they were cast together in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. The behind-the-scenes chaos on that film was the stuff of legend. Davis, playing the grotesque and vengeful Jane Hudson, relished the opportunity to torment Crawford both on and off-screen. In one scene where she had to drag Crawford across the floor, Davis reportedly used excessive force, causing bruises. Crawford, not one to be outdone, got her revenge during a scene where Davis had to kick her. Knowing Davis had a bad back, Crawford secretly filled her pockets with weights, making the kicks excruciating. But the real shocker came after filming Wrapped. Davis was nominated for an Academy Award for her performance, and Crawford was not. Instead of sulking, Crawford found another way to humiliate her rival, by making sure she would be the one on stage if Davis lost. She reached out to the other nominees, offering to accept the Oscar on their behalf should they be unable to attend. When Anne Bancroft won but was absent, Crawford swept onto the stage in full Hollywood glamour, taking the award while a stunned Davis watched from the audience, seething. Their hatred never faded, but ironically, their feud revitalized their careers. Whatever happened to Baby Jane? Reignited interest in older actresses in lead roles, proving that Hollywood didn't have to discard women over 40. The psychological thriller genre, which would later give rise to films like Misery and Black Swan, owes much of its success to the tension and madness they brought to the screen. By the time Crawford passed away in 1977, Davis made no effort to hide her lack of sympathy. You should never say bad things about the dead, only good. Joan Crawford is dead. Good, she famously quipped. Their rivalry wasn't just the most vicious in Hollywood history, it was the most entertaining, shaping the industry in ways neither of them could have predicted. Even in death, their battle never truly ended, cementing them as the ultimate queens of the Hollywood feud. Hollywood rivalries have shaped the industry in ways few realize. Some feuds end in reconciliation, while others leave lasting scars, proving that in Hollywood, competition can be just as brutal off-screen as it is on. So, which rivalry shocked you the most? Drop a comment below, and if you love behind-the-scenes Hollywood drama, check out our next video on the biggest career-ending scandals in Tinseltown.